Thank you very much for being here today. In this presentation, how do you move to the next slide? Oh, to that. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Okay, in this talk, I would like to talk about the Latin script adapted in the Japanese writing system known as Rōmaji. This script is increasingly used in today's written Japanese, and yeah, just as a coincidence, there is an ongoing discussion of orthographic revision for Rōmaji. So yeah, this topic is kind of relevant in today's context. And in terms of its function, Rōmaji is commonly described as phonemic or segmental or alphabetic. I'll come back to this point shortly. But I would like to point out that there are some issues related to this characterization. So my question will be, is Rōmaji really phonemic? And related to that, I would also like to touch upon another broader question, which is the Latin script intrinsically phonemic? And just as a disclaimer, in this presentation, I will focus on the grain size of what is represented by Rōmaji signs. And I'm not going to talk about the phonemicity of individual segments in Japanese phonology or the orthographic depth of Rōmaji representation. Now, this is the structure of my talk, and the first thing, the Latin script and phonemic writing. I'm sure you already know this, but the Latin script was originally developed for the Latin language, and it has been adapted for many languages of the world, not only Western languages, but yeah, many languages around the world. And the basic principle is that one grapheme represents one phoneme. English example, fish. The first two letters correspond to, each corresponds to one single phoneme. And the last two letters constitute a functional unit that also represents one single phoneme. So a grapheme is a minimal graphematic unit, which can be either monographic or polygraphic. And the phoneme is, of course, the minimal phonological unit. In English, it's segmental, but in other languages, it can also be suprasegmental. Now, so if you look at individual words in English or in whatever Latin-based writing system, we can talk about phonemic mapping. But how about characterizing the script as a whole? The common approach is to first, try to identify the primary mapping type. This is, basically the approach proposed by Gelb and some other people in grapholinguistics. And when it comes to the Latin script, the focus is always on the phonemic mapping. You can look at Daniels and Bright's, the book for this, the descriptions of different writing systems. And yeah, because, phonemic mapping can be found in many or maybe most Latin-based writing systems, there seems to be a tendency to equate the Latin script with this specific type of writing, phonemic writing. Now, some more examples from English. Yes, fish phonemic, cat phonemic. Also, in some abbreviations such as A's, yeah, we can speak of phonemic mapping between the graphemes and phonemes. But not all cases are phonemic. Like these examples at the bottom are not one letter, one phoneme correspondence. But still, we tend to focus on the phonemic mapping as the primary type of mapping and consider all the rest as kind of secondary thing. Now, with that in mind, let's look at the Japanese adaptation of the same script. Firstly, the Japanese writing system. Yes, our colleague Terry Joyce yesterday talked about this, and the Japanese writing system is characterized by the mixed use of multiple scripts called kanji, hiragana, katakana, and then Rōmaji. Now, each specific set of functions is assigned to each script. And regarding Rōmaji, yes, it occupies a limited status in the current Japanese writing system, but it is increasingly used. One example here, sentence written in all the scripts, and the highlighted in bold is the Latin script or Rōmaji. Now, the common assumption about Rōmaji is that it is mainly used for romanization. And by romanization, I mean the conversion of a non-Latin based writing system into the Latin script through either transcription or transliteration. And yes, romanization is used in many cases, but not in all cases. Let's take a look at some examples. On the left, we have a railway station sign, which shows Japanese place names transcribed in Rōmaji. So here, yes, well, basically each grapheme represents each phoneme. In the middle, we have a well sample of some internationally known Japanese company names. And yes, we have phonemic writing here and there, Toto, Shiseido, these are transcribed. But when it comes to things like Sony and Asics, they are not Japanese words. So we can't really speak of romanization here, if we consider romanization as, defined here. And on the right-hand side, this is a bit tiny, but this is a post on X, or formerly Twitter, about a boy band new song. And perhaps it's a bit too tiny for you to see, but there are a lot more interesting things going on. English words, abbreviations, and things. So, so these examples clearly indicate that romanization is just one type of Rōmaji usage in today's Japanese writing system. So we need to find out whether Rōmaji still maps onto phonemes in, well, both romanization and other types of representation. To do so, it is necessary to first develop a classification of Rōmaji use types, and then examine which use type or types involve phonemic mapping. That brings us to the third part of the presentation. Because of that time limitation, I'm not going to detail all these types and examples, but just to give you an idea, I have classified Rōmaji use types based on existing studies. My starting point was Mark Irwin's discussion of Rōmaji usage. And because this study identified different types of abbreviations, I have consulted Yanis Haralambous' study of abbreviations in Western writing systems, Latin script writing systems. And as I proceeded, it became clear that Rōmaji usage was more than romanization and abbreviation. So I looked at some other related studies. Now, yes, phonemic mapping can be found in romanization. These are just some examples of romanization where each grapheme corresponds to segmental contrastive phonological units, that is phoneme. So yeah, we can speak of phonemic mapping here. But in some others, we can only speak of partial phonemic mapping. For example, acronym is the use of initial letters of compound elements pronounced as a single word. For example, the English word sim has been imported as shimu in Japanese, but because of the phonological requirements of Japanese, we have an epenthetic vowel here. So to be really strict about this, we can't really speak of phonemic mapping because this is polyphonemic. Yeah, let's leave. Well, it's not only English loan word. We have Japanese words acronymized in this way. Another type, graphic foreignism. I'm not really sure if this is the right term. I coined this, but perhaps there is a better option. But I'm talking about a loan word in the original spelling or Japanese word in unconventional romanization. For example, this company name is normally written in Rōmaji, even though we could spell that thing in katakana or other scripts. Okay? And yes, the car company Matsuda is spelled like that for a very interesting historical reason, if you are interested. But my point is, again, because of epenthesis and also idiosyncratic spelling, here and there we have non-phonemic mappings. So this is partially phonemic. And then non-phonemic uses. One type is graphic abbreviation, which is graphically shortened word pronounced in the original long form. For example, the English word TV is written like that in Japanese as well as in other forms. But if we write it that way, it's pronounced as terebi, polysyllabic pronunciation. So we can speak of a kind of morphographic representation, perhaps a polygraphic morphogram here. And the letter W is often used on online chat and those things. It comes from warai, which means laughter, but it's the Japanese equivalent of lol in English. Initialism is another type of non-phonemic use. Initial letters of compound elements pronounced as letter name sequence. For example, in English, we have VR. Yes, the word has been imported as VR, coming from virtual reality. Another example here is based on Japanese words, which is the name of a Japanese broadcaster. The pronunciation is NHK, so the letter name in the Japanese, Japanized pronunciation. So in all these examples, there is no one-to-one correspondence between grapheme to phoneme. So in my opinion, the best way to describe these things is morphographic, phonographically derived. Some more types. Letter morpheme, a letter name behaving as a unique morpheme. For example, the X in X-ray is used in Japanese like that. And this is quite interesting example, but VIO in Japanese stands for pubic hair in some fashion magazines and stuff. This comes from letter shape iconicism. Okay. Xenography is the last type in this category. Borrowed written word pronounced in Japanese translation. For example, AM, yes, we use that, but it's always, maybe not always, but in most of cases, it is pronounced as gozen rather than AM or anything. Interestingly, of course, AM comes from Latin and the meridian. So there is a very complex history behind this Japanese borrowing of English borrowing of Latin. The last item here is V, standing for優勝 or victory in a tournament. We see that in many newspapers and magazines highlighting sport events. Again, there is no grapheme to phoneme correspondence, probably described as morphographic, derived through different types of writing. We find examples of hybrid cases, combinations of different Romaji use types. Not going into details, but yeah. So as we saw, there can be phonemic mapping or polyphonemic or morphographic mappings combined together to form different combinations of mappings. So my point of this classification is that purely phonemic mapping can be found only in romanization. Yes, in acronym and graphic Porinism, we can speak of partial phonemic writing, and the same applies to hybrids if we can find examples. So this classification shows you different types of mappings, different types of use and different types of mappings represented by those types. How about the distribution? I conducted a corpus-based survey, but yes, in personal communication, our colleague Terry Joyce raised questions about the adequacy of using this particular corpus. So yeah, I need to really think about this. But yeah, let me talk about it anyway. The material is the core subset of the 100 million word balanced corpus of contemporary written Japanese. And the method is, excuse me, I sampled 10% of all words that I could download from that website. Okay, the number was about 800 words. Of course, 800 words containing one or more Rōmaji graphemes. And yeah, I sorted the words using the parameters provided by the database and checked the use type of each item. In most cases, this was automatic, but in some other cases, I had to make decisions as to whether this applies, this particular type belongs to romanization or something else. Now, the result is that about 16% of tokens were identified as romanization, i.e. phonemic mapping. 16% is not a small number, but I'm not really sure if this figure supports the notion that Rōmaji is phonemic. As I said, thank you. As I said earlier, this survey has many questionable points. Firstly, the corpus has been, the adequacy of the corpus has been questioned. Secondly, the method was not really systematic. So I really need to improve this. But yeah, this figure, I think, tells us something about Rōmaji. Oh, hold on. Oh, yes. And that something is when we compare the Japanese use of the Latin script and that of English writing system. In English, the Latin script is the main script. And in most cases, we find phonemic mapping, even though there are irregularities. Okay? So we can still say that English is primarily phonemic. In Japanese, on the other hand, the same script is just one of the several more traditional scripts. Okay? And this relatively new script is used for kind of innovative representation of words, innovative or sometimes playful representation of words. So given these differences, it is fine to characterize the Latin script in this particular writing system as something other than phonemic system. So yeah, Latin script, in my opinion, is not always phonemic. It really depends on how it is used in what writing system. So coming back to my original questions, is Rōmaji really phonemic? And is the Latin script intrinsically phonemic? I would like to say no to both questions. but in parentheses, or is it? Because there is more work to do. And for future research, I would, definitely like to elaborate I would like to conduct more elaborate analysis using maybe another data set or using other methods of analysis. Another interesting thing I would like to do is analysis of Latin script in other non-Latin based writing systems, such as the Roman script used in Chinese for both pinyin and other uses. So that brings us to the end of the presentation, references, and thank you.
Thanks for the talk. I have two questions. The first one, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that many of the examples of foreign words that you've shown would have been written in katakana, for instance, in Japan, as opposed to Rōmaji.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question is, do you have, is this true? And do you have any insights about why there would be a transition from katakana to Rōmaji for writing of foreign words in Japanese?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yes, some of these words from other languages are definitely written in katakana today. For example, terebi, TV can be, is usually written in katakana, but for abbreviation, it is often written in Rōmaji, especially if you have limited space of printing, okay? Like in newspaper, for example. But for other items such as SIM and Google and all the rest, AM may be written in the Japanese word kanji. The Japanese word gozen in kanji. But all these words are usually written in Rōmaji, even though we could spell them in katakana. And there seems to be a tendency to use Rōmaji abbreviation or Rōmaji representation in many cases for kind of added foreign value. For example, to show Google as a non-Japanese company, perhaps it's, I don't know, trendy or something to write it in the original spelling. I don't know the exact reason for this, but that's my tentative explanation.
Very quickly, the second question was about phonetics. When you use katakana, you are inherently limited to the phonetic expressiveness of Japanese because the syllables match your pronunciation. And so my question is, do you think that a more widespread use of Rōmaji could lead in, I don't know, centuries, maybe the Japanese people to expand their pronunciation of foreign words?
That's an interesting question. In my opinion, writing is closely related to phonology, but and it does affect phonology sometimes. But overall, they are separate things. So I would be interested to see that in 100 years time. But I guess this is purely guess. I don't think the increasing use of Rōmaji will have very small impact on Japanese sound system. Yeah.
Okay. So you're questioning this word of romanization. What will you call it? Is the beyond?
By beyond, I mean.
No, but remember the question. We're moving away from single label descriptions to say that they're not adequate. We accept that. But if you're going to go beyond, how can you capture something that's going to capture all of them in a term without recognizing that? That's actually how most people are using. That's how I've used it really to capture all of this.
Yeah.
and you're criticizing that term, but you have to replace it. You just say beyond, and that's not giving us an angle on what beyond and how we reference it.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I'm not ready to propose a new, more adequate term here, but I'm inclined to talk about phonographically derived morphography in the case of Rōmaji. So, I don't know, combination or shift into morphography or more morphographic use of originally phonographic scripts.
Doesn't trip off the tongue, does it? It doesn't trip off the tongue in terms of the description. That's the problem.
Well, yeah.
Americanization.
Yeah, I really need to think about that.
So I have two questions online. So Amalia is asking, I didn't quite understand what the problem was with the corpus. Can you explain that point a little further?
With
The corpus.
the corpus, okay, yes. This corpus is widely used for linguistic research in Japanese linguistics. And yeah, this is proven to be a really good corpus. But when it comes to Rōmaji, yeah, I agree with Terry that this may not be the best thing to use because the coverage of this corpus is fairly limited to publications, even though it covers some blog articles and some online communication. Rōmaji is more widely used in casual, informal communication, such as SMS and Facebook, Twitter, those things. But unfortunately, the corpus doesn't cover that kind of usage. So that's the inadequacy Terry pointed out to me.
Okay, and a question by Christian Boden. What about the use of European diacritics in the romanization of Japanese?
European diacritics.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I don't have an example here, but in Japanese, we use either the macron or the circumflex to indicate long vowel, but this is not compulsory. Now, in loan words, for example, there are loan words from French or Spanish or those writing systems where you use diacritics. They may or may not be retained in borrowed form in Japanese. So I think people really care about diacritics when it comes to Japanese adaptation. I need to look into that though.